Welcome, deep learners. Thank you for coming. Today's talk is the first in-person talk that I've done. We've been doing online last year. And so what I do is something called philosophy. Okay, so philosophy is spiritual, political philosophy. I worked in politics for some of my life. And at a certain point, I was working for a high-level interstate mediation. And so I used to work with heads of state, heads of government and senior state officials, military leaders, rebel leaders, all kinds of political figures. And during this mediation, I asked a lot of them what the word politics means for them. And each of them gave me a different answer. I never studied politics formally, but I learned it through my experience. And what I have come to believe, what is politics for me is about how you engage in the world. And that's the way I use political in the words philosophy, okay? It's about how we interact and engage in the world. So the talks or the classes I teach, I'll be teaching them every other Sunday, not every Sunday, so we can have a little bit of a Sunday off also. And they really are about looking at spiritual concepts and ideas and teachings and how they can really apply to us in the world and how we can apply them in the world, how we can use them in our life, okay? And how life is using them in our realities. So it's really about spirituality, yes, but really about living in this world. There's a Christian saying, I think the Quakers use it a lot. The Quakers say, how to be in this world but not of it. And all of us aspire, at some level, we aspire to have a world where we're not really that of this world, and the world we know it. The worldliness, what Jesus Christ taught was poverty, which was an internal poverty, not an external poverty. Okay. So today, I want to talk to you about the possibilities of this world. Okay, I want to talk to you about the possibilities of this world. Not of a dream world, not of an ideas world, but of this world. For me, when I think of the possibilities for our world, I think of a world where there is a natural order, what I call a natural order. So I'll just write a few of these things down so we know where we are, okay? There is a natural order. What is a natural order? To me, just a few things about a natural order. A natural order is self-correcting. Okay, I learned this in biology in class 6. They give you this idea of the algae in the pond. I don't know if you learned it in your class, in your school, where there's a bunch of algae in a pond and somebody pours some detergent in it. Now the detergent is something that the algae can feed off of. So the algae feeds off the detergent and they multiply and they take over the pond. So they overpopulate the pond. But at a certain point, this overpopulation is limited by the amount of oxygen in the water. And therefore now the algae start to get depopulated within the limits of the oxygen. So the pond can self-correct. If we really look at what we're learning about our bodies are self-correcting. They are self-healing. We are just only beginning to learn about this and how to use it now. I mean, there's been a lot of ancient knowledge about it over time, but we've lost some of that knowledge and we're coming back to it now and we're discovering more and we're learning it in a different way. So a self-correcting world. We don't need somebody else to try and come and create the order or fix something. That there's a natural self-correction and you see it around you in nature. That's how nature operates. A world of harmony. This is something that the Eastern Asians really, really focus on, is harmony. And with harmony comes grace. So we're not looking for equality we're not looking for sameness, but we're looking for harmony, for a balance within the diversity. So we don't say that I'm equal to you. We say that I am unique, just like you. Because there is no such thing in nature as equal. No two things were ever created the same. No leaf in the history of all leaves has ever been the same. No drop of water in the history of water, no snowflake in the history of all snowflakes has ever been the same. So there is no such thing as that level of equality. Okay, we could talk, and even value. Can we measure value? Because people can then talk about equal value. Well, let's all have equal value. Can we measure value? Can we put a number on it? And of course, freedom. Freedom is an essential part of a natural order. All the trees are free to move in whichever direction they want to. The blades of grass to grow where there is fertile soil. The birds to fly where there is space. There is a freedom, there's an essential freedom in a natural order. But of course, the freedom is shaped by the landscape. The birds can't fly through the trees. The trees can't grow where there are other branches. And the grass can't grow when there's no fertile soil. So there is a freedom that is shaped by our context, that is harmonious in its path. Of course, beauty. We know that the divine nature is the most beautiful creator there is. We know that no matter how many photographs we take, we cannot capture the full essence of a sunset. We know that no matter how many videos we take, we can never capture the real grace of a creature in flight. And of course, I've already talked about this idea of diversity. I'm sure there are many other concepts in the idea of a natural order. But to me, I believe it is possible, this is my particular vision, is that it's possible to have a world where there is harmony, where there is balance, where there is grace, where there is love, where there is freedom, where there is peace, through all these different qualities, where even conflict is part of harmony. Okay, where even conflict, because I mean, we do see in the natural world there's conflict, but then the conflict creates a certain balance. So even conflict is part of creation. Now, the other two things that we can really look at for what is possible in our world is how we perceive our wealth. Because when we look at nature, there are two systems of nature that I see in relation to wealth. The first is abundance. Because I see abundance in a waterfall. It's never ending. It's ever flowing. It doesn't run out. I see abundance in the ocean. The waves never stop coming. I see abundance in the sky. The clouds never stop moving. So for me, this concept of abundance, which is really something that has been gaining popularity with people. People are looking for it, and people categorize it and call it and use it differently. Okay? But really, there is a desire for abundance. And when I see nature, it shows that it's very possible. It's not a silly idea. That there's an infinite amount of resources, what we call resources, but I would like to find maybe a better word for resources. The other thing I see in nature that I've really thought about a lot is cycling. Okay, so we have the abundance or the infinity, and then we have the cycle. In the Hindu system, they talk about the three. That is Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer of life, and Shiva, the destroyer. And this is the cyclical nature of nature. And we always have this going on all the time, not only in nature, in all things, in ourselves, in our cells, even as we breathe in and out, we're transforming oxygen into carbon dioxide through this process. So one thing I don't see in nature is scarcity. I don't see it. I think it really depends on how you look. Because, for example, somebody might say to you, oh, well, the desert, there's a scarcity in the desert. Well, I'm like, scarcity of what? There's an abundance of sand. How many grains of sand are there in the desert? There's still life in the desert. It's just a different way of living. You know, there's the biggest skies in the desert, the most stars in the desert. There is no scarcity. Now, when we think about for each of ourselves the world we want to see, the world we dream of somewhere in our hearts, we dream of it, and then immediately a shadow comes. That shadow is it's not possible. Look at the human beings around us, and usually it's the other human beings, not ourselves, when we think about that. Immediately we start to think about the possibilities, it's not really realistic, and something takes us a little bit back. There are two things about that. The first is that from this we know that this desire for a world of unlimited possibility is within each of our hearts. Every single person has this desire. Even those who are controlling the world, even those top 0.0001%, the people we don't know about who have so much so-called power in this world, in the physical world, the ones who have their agendas, including things like depopulation or control of resources, creating a kind of, enslaved financial system and work system, even they have a desire for this because they are dreaming of this world for themselves without any limits on their possibilities, right? They're only dreaming it for themselves, but they're still dreaming it. So they have this desire. The second thing about this is, where does this shadow come from? That doesn't allow, that tells us, no, this is not realistic. It will never happen. Or maybe not in my lifetime. The shadow comes from our experience, from what we've seen around us happen, what we felt happen to us. It is coming from what we know, of this world. So we need to look at that, because we're imagining the future from what we know. Now, the interesting thing about imagining the future from what we know is it's limited to what we know. We cannot imagine the future of what we don't know, because we don't know it. The only way we access a vision of the future outside of what we know is through something called inspiration. Breathing in divine information. Inspire, breathe in divine knowledge. Right? Some of us may have dreams that other people around us may think is not possible, not realistic, not practical. But we may have pursued some of these dreams, even in a small way. Even if it is, you can't get ready in the next 10 minutes. And you do. Because there's some part of you that is connected to infinity. And infinity means no limits on any possibility. But how we have been taught, or I call it programmed, how we have been programmed to think is thinking from what we already know. Do your research before you start something. Look at what others are doing before you start something. Understand the context before you start something. This has been drilled into all of us. And I'm not saying these are bad or wrong, but I'm saying it has taught us to only think from where we know. So in order to start to create a world that is beyond our limited knowledge, because our limited knowledge at this moment is not able to create the world we dream of, right? Hence the shadow. Then we need to tap into this to create. We create from here, not from here, not from the programming. Even in a small way, even if it is making an omelette with, Smarties in it. Even in a small way, we can tap into here to begin to create something that transcends the limits of our our own experience and our own limited knowledge and view. Okay, and just for you guys to do a small exercise. If you look at yourself maybe 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, for some of us 5 years ago, there are things that you did not know you would do, and you could not imagine, or there are people you would meet or be with or relate to that you could never imagine you would relate to. I married a hip-hop artist from Dandora. I never in a million years thought I would date a hip-hop. Hip-hop artists were not even really in my sphere of, I didn't know any hip-hop artists before I met him. And now I find myself living together, having a child together, in a deep connection with somebody who's very, very different from many of the people I know. So we can see that the reality of life is unlimited possibilities, because you all are a testament to that. All your life and all your experience is a testament to the unlimited possibilities. Because where your limited mind thought you'd go, you went beyond. So now where you can go from here, your mind cannot know. Your mind cannot project. And we can talk a little bit about well, let's just go with the flow of the class. Let's leave this aside a little bit. How do we go into this? How do we get into this? We'll just get into the class itself. How do we move into infinity? The only way we can access infinity is through something that David Beatty teaches, is through the present moment. Because time is finite, time is in some way two-dimensional, future, past. You can only think about the future, and you can only reflect upon the past, right? Because you may say, oh, I'm thinking about what you're saying now. I'm thinking about what you're saying now. Well, I'm saying, I've already said what I'm saying. Have you already passed it? You're thinking about the past. You think, as soon as I've said it, it's past. As soon as I've said it, it's past. You can't touch the moment with your mind. And your mind functions in time, in two dimensions. So you have to get into the present moment. That's the source of infinity. That's where you touch infinity. And the only way to touch infinity is with your heart, with your presence. And your presence is not your thought. Your thought can get into present moment flow. You can use your thought through present moment flow, but you can't touch infinity unless you are. So creating from infinity and creating infinity. What happens is when you create from infinity, what do? You create infinity. When you reach out, let's look at this in a very simple way. and something in your heart just expands, and you reach out to somebody and you hug them, or you just look into their eyes and say, I love you. And they need that. You've expanded their consciousness and you've connected with them in infinity. And that expansion of consciousness in you expanded the consciousness in them. And that's going to expand the consciousness when they interact with the next person, and when that person and that person and that person. So from infinity, from love, which is an infinite, it's a quality that is operates in the infinite. You now have set off a chain of events that is infinitely projecting out into the universe, or into the metaverse, or into the multiverse. Okay? So that's how we can operate in infinity. But I want to come back to the world, because we're going in now into the individual, but to the world. You see, the issue is this. Where we are in our world, this physical world that has given us certain experiences of pain, of frustration, of sadness, of disappointment, the things that we see wrong, and for many people, deep trauma and lifelong hardship, all of these kind of things. The world is a function of the collective consciousness. The world is a function of our consciousness. Okay? So, as we've seen with nature, it's not that we have scarce resources. It's not that there's limited food to go around. We already have, I think, all the food in the world, more than all the food in the world we need. Hi, welcome. We already have more than all the resources in the world that we need. I think there is enough food on the planet at this moment to feed everybody. In some countries, some people are dying of being too fat, and some countries are dying of people having not enough food. The problem is not the resources. The problem in the world is how we are using the resources, how we are distributing the resources, how we are sharing the resources, how we are extracting the resources. Okay? It's the how. The how is really the essential, it's like, the how is almost it's the fundamental question for the outcome. This is something that Gandhi and other karma yogis have taught for thousands of years. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's fine to fight for independence, but what is going to change the world, not only your country, is how you do it. It's fine to try to transform racism, but what is going to change your country or your time is how you do that. Martin Luther King, you know? So this is a fundamental problem here, the how. And what is the how a function of? The how is a function of our consciousness. Okay? And our consciousness, of course, we can say our awareness, we can use any kind of words, our state of being is changing. And there's a macro level of analysis we can do on our consciousness, and then there's a micro level of analysis. So let's look at the micro. The micro analysis of consciousness is that from day to day, your awareness, your consciousness, your capacity is changing. So one day, I may be very patient with my son. And then half an hour later, I've had a phone call from somebody that stressed me out, and my patience literally drops to zero in just 5 seconds. So that's the micro. But if I hadn't had that phone call, or I hadn't got triggered, how I would treat my son would be different. So we can see that the how is directly caused by the state of our of our emotions, but actually mainly of our awareness. At a macro level, what is happening to our consciousness? Every experience, so I always imagine consciousness as bubbles in a glass of champagne. Depending on my audience, sometimes I say beer. Okay? But I always think of consciousness like bubbles. And that all the bubbles, they have a journey up. Some go like this, some go like this, some go like this, some are slower, some are faster. That's consciousness. The nature of consciousness is to elevate. It's always doing that. And it elevates through experience. Okay? And some of us may be over here in our where we are in our souls, where our energies are. Some of us may be here, some of us may be here. And the enlightened souls are now in the air. They merge. They merge with the one. Okay? So our journey, our consciousness, the journey of our consciousness is always to elevate, to elevate, to elevate. Now, if we look at all these bubbles as where the world may be collectively, we could say perhaps human consciousness at the moment is over here. And that's why we have a world where we have war and famine and obesity and pollution and corruption and hatred and racism and sexism and all of those things. If the world was simply to move here, what we would as human beings create would be completely different. Okay? I want to give you an example. Oh, it's a bit of I'm trying to use an example. I just thought of an example, but it's might be considered immodest. So let's try and see. Okay. All right, let me take myself as an example. I used to work in, politics, mediation, all this kind of stuff. I used to live in a 6-star hotel, and I used to wear high heels every day. And now I don't wear shoes a lot of the time. And I used to make my hair straight, and I used to wear very tight, suit dresses things. I used to have 2 phones. It's all a function of my job, okay? And I earned a lot of money. I felt it, even at that time, I felt it was an indecent amount of money. Because I kept thinking I'm supposed to be serving humanity, but it was really crazy how much they pay you. Now, how did I use that money? Because I didn't have a lot of free time, because I was working so much, I would buy clothes in the airport duty frees. Have you ever bought clothes? Most of the clothes are designer label. I wouldn't buy them because they're designer label, but it's just I didn't have time to shop. I didn't go on holiday for like a year. So I would only, when I was flying around, I'd pick up something that I needed. Okay? And if I lost it or it got damaged, I wouldn't even think twice about it. I think probably it was easy for me to spend, we don't even need to, but like, I was easily spending, let's say, 10 times the amount of money I spend on myself now. Easily. Now I have a child, that also factors in, so I don't spend as much money on myself or time on myself, but still. But now, spending much, 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 much less, I live here. I get to do this. The how we do anything is a direct function of our consciousness. Therefore, how the world is working today all the problems in it, is a direct function of the consciousness. So how do we change the world? Because most of us have this desire for this beautiful world we dream of somewhere, and many of us have given up trying to change it. This is the beautiful thing. Many of us were trying to change it, myself included. I worked with people who are trying to make peace between warring countries. But now I got so tired of that. I'm like, let me just work on myself. Let me just make myself happy. And that was the beginning of the bigger change. Because when I started to say, okay, let me make myself happy, I started to think, okay, what's going to make me happy? And what I realized for me that was going to make me happy was, I want my work to be my joy. I want my joy to be my offering to the whole world. I just started there. And from there, the journey to your highest self begins. When you confront your true desire, the way to getting there is through all your deepest fears. And that is the journey of consciousness. And as you expand your consciousness, you start, and I was telling this, I think, to Peter one day, okay? I was saying, I've worked for 15 years. I worked for 15 years in South Sudan. I worked in villages. I worked in palaces. I worked in hotels. I did all kinds of different work there. All, humanitarian, political, whatever. And the idea was I want to do something that's beneficial in the world. And then I got so tired and I said, I want to work what makes me happy. I didn't know exactly what that was. Part of it was this teaching. And now I find out, oh my gosh, I'm actually a healer. And even when I say the word initially, I'm like, that sounds ridiculous. That sounds so weird. Like, that's a bit weird. I think, am I going crazy? But now the work that I do is transforming people in a huge way. And they are telling me that directly every day. And they are telling other people. And what is happening as a result is this. So I work with somebody and I facilitate them, but they transform their consciousness. They elevate their consciousness, okay? Now, when they elevate their consciousness, and lovely drawings. So here's me, and I just decided to make myself happy, and what happened was I elevated my consciousness, okay? Then I started working with other people. And now what happened was these other people started elevating their consciousness. Now these people, they have a bunch of people in their lives that they relate with and connect to. Their partners, their family, their friends, their co-workers. Some of them leave their jobs and start, new careers. Some of them, change the way they relate to their children or their family. Some of them change the way they talk to their colleagues. What's happening is it's exponentially increasing. It's exponentially increasing, infinitely increasing, because every single interaction that every single person that I have worked with who has expanded their consciousness has changed, because that person's consciousness is different now. So the way they interact with people in the world is different, without effort. You see, we've always had laws. We've always had laws. These laws were to guide our higher aspirations of how human society and the world should be. The problem was the laws were trying to get us to behave. How do you say the word? Equal to a level of consciousness up here. But the collective human consciousness is down here. So people are not going to behave like this. Okay? They're simply not. It's going to have to be enforced. And that's what we do. We enforce morality. We enforce law. But when you elevate your consciousness here, you behave far more beautifully than even these laws can ever dictate to you. You see, compassion or sharing with your neighbor, love thy neighbor. You can't force somebody to love their neighbor. They can pretend, they can make you cookies and bring it over, but they can be, in their hearts, they can have hatred. So we don't, as consciousness expands, we need less and less control, societal control. So let's go back to the beginning of the class. So the beginning of the class, we talked about a natural order. That's my view or dream for the world, a natural order. But today, we have human control, where there are institutions, there are individuals, there are groups, and there are structures and systems that impose control on all of us, even within our families. We impose control. Hi, have a seat. At the macro level, we have the World Trade Organization. We have the IMF. We have governments. We have deep states. We have kitchen cabinets. These guys are finding ways to control us. There's been, in the time of COVID, there's been a lot of controversy about the measures that are being imposed on society, on individuals, the security, what is it called, surveillance, the surveillance. Like in China now, you're tracked all the time by the government. They know everywhere where you are. And they can shut down your access to a lot of things. As we move into a virtual system, as we move into a digital system where we don't use paper money, it's possible that entities can shut our spending down. Number one way to control somebody. You don't abide by the law, your digital currency, your flow, digital currency flow, is stopped. It's very possible that can happen. And it's happening in certain places. So we have that level of control. But let's look at a small level. I use myself as an example. My son is 2. They call it the terrible twos. He does not want to be told what to do. He doesn't. But there's certain things I need to happen, like I need him to have a bath or I need him to eat dinner. Now, at the moment, the level of consciousness I have is I sometimes just pick him up and put him in the bath and then he's crying. That's the level, depending on the day. But sometimes in my more conscious moments, I talk to him and I connect with him. And there's something between us, he just calms down. And then it's easy for me to explain, why this bath is necessary. Or sometimes I'm even more conscious and I say, the bath is not that necessary. Control. Right now, all I do is I pick him up, I control him. Direct function of my consciousness. But there's another way. You know the story of the sun and the wind? Do you remember Aesop's fable? The story of the sun and the wind. The sun and the wind have a competition about who can make a man take off his coat. You remember that? The wind says, "Oh, what is the sun going to do? I'm going to blow this guy so much his coat is just he's going to What happened when the wind blew stronger and stronger, the man held his coat, right? Tighter and tighter. What did the sun do? The sun simply shone. And the man got hot. And he just took off his coat. So opposite of control. It's creating an environment where you can open. So what's happening here is society has created structures and systems of control which is a function of our consciousness, and therefore these structures are internal to us. They are within our subconscious. And so the only way we know how to operate is through control. But we want to move to creating so much safety and security for ourselves internally that we can simply open like a flower. So it was, I think we started a little bit with Gandhi, but to go back to him, he said, be the change that you wish to see. It's a very deep statement. We knew it's deep at some point. At some level, we understand it's deep. But now we can really understand how it's deep. There is no need to change anybody else. There is no need to change anything else. When you change yourself, you change the entire world. You change the universe, you change the metaverse, the multiverse, the cosmos. Because that change is impacting energetically everything infinitely. And that's really the most powerful thing you can do. The most powerful thing you can do is tap into your desire, your true desire, which is where infinity lies, and start living and creating from there, even if it's in a small way, even if it's in what you're cooking. Because it leads to the expansion of consciousness in the cosmos. I think we'll leave it there for today.